Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the finale of Under the Banner of Heaven. A great finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, obviously there's the whole situation with Onias, Bill sitting down to talk to him, and eventually Jeb shows up to hear the conversation about some of the stuff that went down that Ron sent Robin off to go to Nevada, bet their money so that they could basically, it's like, oh, we'll build a school and so on and so forth. I think like kind of further expand what they, are currently doing. Sadly, later on, they find out that Robin did not follow what Ron wanted him to bet on, like bet on the wrong. Because Ron wanted to bet on like very specific horses or something, and Robin bet on something else, lost all the money they had left. But Ron still believing himself, like, oh, I got this. It's like he wrote a list of everyone, obviously everyone that kind of wronged him, because he learned from Matilda, which, it's going to be sad because Matilda's going to carry that with her, because it's like, right, if I hadn't probably said anything. To be fair, they already had their suspicions when it came to Brenda anyway, but she kind of helped basically forge the list. But once again, that conversation of, oh, Ron's just pretending like, oh, it's the word of God, like, oh yeah, it came to me, it's like, these are the people that need to be removed. It's like, no, there are people you feel that need to be removed. So obviously this whole situation there, because of the list order, Diana is first on the list. So even Onias is like, oh, I think Diana and their kids are already dead, because it's like, right, he probably killed her before he killed Brenda, because that's the order of the list. So, and that just like jumping around a little bit, that Brenda thing, like I didn't even want to watch it. Like that was horrendous. Luckily, and I think it's good that they didn't show everything, but still, like even like the fact is like, oh, trying to knock her out. I guess in their way, that was their way to, I guess it was their way of trying to be merciful about it. I don't know. The brutality of what they did, there's no mercy in that. And it just sucks. Because, especially because later on Jeb gets visited by the person from the church. The same one that he was part of the same group that wouldn't let Brenda get a divorce. I mean, maybe it worked out in the end, but it's just like she was kind of struggling in this battle alone. I mean, obviously she had Diana with her, but she was trying to do everything she could, But this guy came to Jeb and he was like, right, let's put this behind us. Like, let's kind of bury this, because the Mormonism's already got a bad enough rap. He was even referencing like, oh, we've recently allowed like Negroes, until you're like, okay, so we're going there. And now it's like, right, this fundamentalist LDS stuff, we don't need to, bring that into focus, because it's going to make the religion look bad. But like, Alan's taking offense to it. It's like, oh, so you're telling me that we should just let it go. My wife and my daughter's brutal murder, just going to sweep that under the rug because it will look bad upon the church, knowing that fundamentalists are responsible for this. That fundamentalists, once again, they try to shy away from the nasty history of their religion. So, but you can tell Jeb was kind of like, no, I'm not going to be all about that. Like, this is about bringing people to justice, and and he even referenced the fact is that Jeb has kind of broken the law a little bit, or bent the law rather. It's like, oh, you've helped us in the past, like because even Jeb, and I think this comes back full circle, and it kind of, I'm sure it leaves a bad taste in his mouth to some extent, but Jeb himself said he's a Mormon before a cop. So he ended up helping them find out, like, oh, because there was someone, I forgot what the word was what the situation was, but apparently there was someone that was abusing their child, and he basically, the guy was never arrested or whatever, but Jeb ended up letting the church know about it for some, I think he was trying to, like, this person was trying to start a Boy Scout situation or something like that. So Jeb armed the church with information about this person, even though they were never fully arrested. But Jeb is like, no, because this person wasn't abused their child or something like that. So the church had a right to know, essentially. But that's what the church are trying to be like, oh, you kind of bent things towards like, oh, putting the church first. All we're asking you to do is the same thing here. And basically he turns, and obviously there's the whole like kicking of dust off his feet. I didn't quite get it. Alan explained it, but I didn't quite get it. But basically, it was almost like condemning your family to an extent. He condemned both Alan and Jeb, but it didn't mean anything to Alan. I think Alan had already left this all behind. And he had talked about this thing that, like, him and, because he talked to Jeb about his family. He's like, things obviously were bad between him and Brenda, because he's like, oh, I got a job offer, and then Brenda followed me because she thought I was lying. But then he's like, in that moment, he was sitting down with Erica, and he looked, and like, Brenda looked at him, and I think they found their way back to each other. He said that having lost his testimony, he found faith in his family. That's what he started to believe in. When he lost, like, his religion, at least he had his family to believe in. And I thought that was a beautiful sentiment. It's sad that, you know, because he was even saying, like, right, you need to find them. And it's like, oh, don't worry, we'll find your brothers. But Alan was like, no. Like, the fact is, don't let my family sacrifice what Brenda sacrificed, what she was fighting for. Don't let that die. Don't let that, like, what this was all about. Because I'm jumping around a little bit, because obviously they're trying to find, they ended up finding the two guys that was with Dan and Ron, and they were in the car that day during the murder. Almost like, why didn't you come forward or something like that? Maybe they were scared and they didn't want to acknowledge that they were a part of it, even though they didn't do anything. They were still accessories because they were in the car. They didn't say anything until now, so they were protecting themselves. But at the end of the day, because Dan had previously visited Brenda, threatening her, saying, like, right, you need to bring Diana back to Ron, and you need to basically stop this foolishness. And she was like, are you threatening me? And he was like, no. The fact is, he broke into her house and said, I was scared because I thought that was going to be the moment, but it happens later on anyway, and it sucks. And it's heartbreaking too, because, well, Ron was initially going to do it, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. And so it's like, right, it's on Dan. Dan's the one that committed both atrocities. Don't get it twisted. Ron played his part, and he set this all in motion, and he's also the one that supplied, like, the core and stuff. So he helped in this regard. Like, he was an accessory to this whole situation. But Dan's the one that actually did it, and it's heartbreaking, you know? Because even at the last minute, Brenda was trying to reach out to Ron, saying he didn't have to do this. But they were both too lost. They were too far gone. They were too lost in their beliefs. You know, once again, and that's the sad thing when people will use religion to justify some of the atrocities that they do. I mean, this isn't, you know, I think that still applies even to today. But in the past, plenty of atrocities have been committed for that purpose, you know, and it's sad. Once again, I think you could have religion as long as you're not, like, on the no beef with religion. Certain aspects here and there, like certain beliefs, I'm like, I'm not copacetic with that. But in general, like, the premise of just don't be an asshole, I can get behind. But then you have people on extreme lengths, like you use Ron and Dan, for example. And on a lot of people in this regard, just like how adherent they are to certain aspects of this Mormonism, like how certain things play out later on in the episode, you're like, shame on those people. Like, I'll go ahead and talk about it. When Brenda was with Matilda and Sam was dragging her away, no one helped. It's like, because it was a whole bunch of men around, but none of them lifted a finger. I'm like, you see her saying that, oh my God, this guy, he's going to hurt her. No one lifted a damn finger. Because I guess maybe there are people, it is Utah, the Lafferty, so they know who he is. So he's a Lafferty. Or even putting that aside, it's like, he's most likely the man, and a woman's not to question her place in this, which is like, does that apply to women outside is that supposed to apply to women outside the marriage too? Because it's not like that's his wife. His wife is in the car, but no one did anything. And she was able to, like, stop Sam. She's like, say your testimony. It's like, you want to pretend like you're special, that you were chosen, but you're not. You're a small man trying to make yourself feel important when in actuality you're not. And Matilda got away from him, and they were calling for Sam's wife to come with them, but she didn't. And it's just like, so she's still neck deep in it. Because, to be fair, like, Matilda and Diana are the ones that Brenda could reach. She could never reach Ron's wife, not Ron, Sam's wife. She could never reach her. So, Or was that, I'm trying to think, is that Ron's wife or was that Sam's wife who was in the car? I can't remember. I'm pretty sure that was Sam's wife, right? But the fact is no one did anything, but I mean, that's also, that isn't just the Mormonism thing to it. It is kind of that bystander effect too, because sometimes it's like someone's like, oh, someone else would do it. But I think this particular incident, it could be a bystander effect, but I think it's more so obviously a Mormonism thing, like in that regard of just kind of like, right, not trying to interfere. This is like a family situation. Once again, I think it's because people know that Sam's a Lafferty, so I think that probably like added layers to that, because that family's name is so powerful. But circling back, either way, ultimately, they ended up finding out that Diana wasn't dead. Ultimately, everything that led to that, I'm kind of blinking on the series of events, but they ultimately ended up finding out Diana wasn't dead because on the drive there, those two guys that were with Ron and Dan, because they knew that Dan, it's like, oh, we need to make more money so that we can, pay for essentially their crusade. Well, they basically were like, we know that Dan was only biding enough time till he could get Ron back on the wagon and be like, right, we need to go after Diana, because they didn't go after her first, because I guess maybe on some level Ron couldn't bring himself to try. I mean, for one, well, they found out where she was initially because sadly one of their children sent him a letter, and it had their address, so he was able to eventually find them. And at one point in time, because they were hiding out in Florida, that she happened to be in a convenience store and she saw him and she ran and luckily packed up and got out of there. But I think that was after Brenda had already been murdered. So like I said, I think there's some part of himself that couldn't bring, maybe he didn't get the letter in time to find out where they were, or whether it was, I don't remember if they really covered that, but it was more so, I think, maybe some part of himself still couldn't bring himself to do it despite him having going down his path. I mean, he couldn't even bring himself to kill Brenda. Once again, he still took part in it, but still. So for Dan, it's like, right, he just needed to kind of bide enough time until Ron was ready to kind of charge himself back up so they could go after Brenda, Because the only reason why, like, the Lowes didn't get killed is because, unfortunately, they were, unfortunately for Dan and Ron, fortunately for them, they weren't in the house at the time. So the house just got smashed up, but, we already know they weren't there at the time. They were away at the time, so it kind of worked out for them, because they could have been other victims, because they were on the list. So, but those guys, what was it, Chip and whatnot, the guys that were with Dan and Ron, ended up pointing Jeb and Bill towards where the weapons were, because it's like, oh, the weapons were thrown out in the car, because I think, wasn't it, they ended up stealing the car to get away from Ron and Dan, because it's like, yo, this is too wild, they're too crazy. The fact is that they found the switchblades, or like razor blades that they had, but those weren't the murder weapons. And Jeb's being like, right, they're atheists, like, how can we believe anything that they said? But Bill's like, yeah, but that's the thing, they are atheists. What would they gain for lying by protecting Ron and Dan? Like, oh, this isn't, they're not going to get in good with God by doing this, so they have no reason. But it's because Jeb was grown to believe that atheists will lie to you or whatever. And then Bill sets the record straight. He's like, if anyone's going to lie, it's actually your people, the LDS. He tells, because that guy who visited was talking to Alan and Jeb earlier in the episode, telling them to kind of back away from this investigation. Same guy was talking to Bill about, like, oh yeah, like, basically his people in the past, like, they worked with us to stomp out blah 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 blah. And Bill's like, no, that's not the real story. Basically, they were going after people who were not, because their president was murdered, and it's like, these people, that wagon trail of people they were after had nothing to do with that, and they knew it, but they were just out for blood because those people weren't part of, like, the Mormonism. So Bill's people were tricked into coming along, and they're like, wait, why are your people dressed like us? It's like, oh, you're going to make us take the fall for it. They say, screw it, we're not going to take part in this, and they leave. And so Home Dude has his people dress up like them, and it's like, oh, cover your face, I don't care if it's with mud or whatever, just make yourself look like them. And it's like, oh, look, they're up there, so all you have to do, if your people want to survive, you need to surrender your arms. They do, and every single one of them was massacred. They killed a horde of innocent people, and they twisted history. He's like, right, because Bill was trying to say Jeb, like, because Jeb's so focused on having religion be his compass that it's like, right, you're ignoring sometimes things are like, our job is to just follow the facts. And he's like, right, kind of basically like, yeah, the facts don't lie. Like, the only people who lie are your people. So it's just, once again, just shaking Jeb's religion, especially with everything with his wife, because she kind of, well, he still kind of, like, adheres to certain aspects to it, because he was telling his wife, like, oh, you're going to stay away from that guy, you must obey me, or something like that. But then he's also telling her, like, right, like, what this religion has done in the past to women, like, forcing them to be subservient, and, like, even raping them. Like, it's just, like, the nastiness of it. But for her, she's like, I raised my family in this, and she's like, if you won't help me, like, I married a faithful man to raise my family. I want my children raised by a faithful man, so if it's not going to be you, I'll find someone else. So she was threatening to leave him, so it's like he was in a tailspin already on top of all of this. He even talked to Bill at one point. He's like, yo, like, how do you go through life without a compass? He's like, you think I don't have a compass? Because he's like, right, because you don't, like, might not, like, have religion on your side, that it's like, how do you not, like, get lost without it? And for Bill, he's like, I don't even know if there is a God, but he's like, look at this. You guys want to chalk this up to be like some miracle of God, but what if there is no God? This is just it. It in existence, this view, just take it in, is a miracle in its own right. Maybe God made it, maybe he didn't, but just accepting, like, stay in the present, be here. And that's kind of something Alan kind of tried to do, was be there for his family, like, after everything that went by, like, not being swayed by his brothers anymore, not going to their side. Once again, having faith in him, Brenda, and Erica, like, his family being his faith, his foundation, Because they initially, once again, they were contacting a detective in Florida to try and check on Diana, but Diana had already run away. Then you had them in Reno trying to track down Dan and Ron. But even at one point, Jeb ended up having that nightmare about the moment it was happening. I was like, there's no way that it's got to be a nightmare of his. And it's like, it was. But it kind of gave him a little bit of a sign later on. But they ended up, because Ron and Dan ended up, like, winning big at the casino. And I think they afterwards prayed. And then Dan looked to the camera and just kind of, like, the whole thing is like, right, rather than you basically would keep, because we saw that as that's just part of, like, I don't know if that's still a part of Mormonism, or whether that's something that's just, like, very, like, old school or whatever. But obviously we even saw Brenda and the others having to do that in the church, where it's just kind of like, you would rather, like, slit your throat from ear to ear than tell something. It was some part of all of that. And you're just like, and the fact is, Dan was sending that message to, well, Jeb was like, it was more so aimed at me, because that wasn't just for security who might be, or people from the casino who were watching. He knew, like, not necessarily Jeb, but he knew maybe someone from Utah would be investigating, who most of the people there, especially the cops, are going to be Mormon. So he knew, like, right, this is for you. Or maybe he already knew that Jeb was on his trail, because sadly Jeb and them were always, like, one step behind. So another interesting thing, when they went to see Mama Lafferty, they focused on that closet for a bit. I was like, what's up with that? I was like, I felt like, wait, is there someone behind there? And lo and behold, later on, it turns out it was Matilda. I was like, I figured someone had to be behind here. I thought it was going to be one of the sons. But, so Mama Lafferty's just as much a part of this, because I think she ended up calling either Ron or Dan or something like that at one point in time. And you're like, man. No. She ended up calling Sam, and that's how Sam ended up tracking down Diana and Matilda. But the fact is that she's just as guilty of this, because, she was a part of this system of just kind of like, believing that a wife's place is to not basically stray away. It was to basically serve the household, essentially, and she was just kind of condemning them for what they did. The sad thing is, though, once again, it was good news to find out Diana was alive, but she got the heartbreaking news because she hadn't heard about what happened to Brenda. But she did get Brenda's letter, and I thought it was sadly Brenda had just sent it off, put it in her mailbox before Ron and Dan came to her. And the letter was her saying, like, it's been a trying couple months, but you're my sister. We need to stand against the men in the church and stuff like that who've kind of contorted this and manipulated it and soured it. We need to kind of stand up to them. So And I even love this line from Bill, kind of connecting it to all that, to the whole Diana thing. It's like, no, our job is to get those monsters off her back. Diana doesn't need us to save her. She can manage on her own. All we need to do is get these monsters off her back so she can go live her life. She doesn't need saving, because it was almost like Jeb was kind of almost treating it like, right, she's a woman that's subservient to all of this, so she's going to go back home. But it's like, no, she was trying to do what Brenda wanted. She was trying to save the rest of her sisters. It's like, right, I wasn't there. Brenda sacrificed herself to save me, and it put her in the crosshairs of all of this. I need to go, and that's why she rushed to save Matilda. It's like, right, I need to save as much of my family as possible, She felt the need to carry on that torch of what Brenda sparked in her, and I wonder, will that still be a part of her? Because she ultimately ends up leaving with Matilda later on when they cross the Utah line, but I am curious, will she ever try to come back for her other sister wives, or it's just kind of like, right, she did what she could, and at the end of the day, ultimately Ron and Dan are captured, and I'm glad things played out that way. I was terrified, because it's like, terrified because they had set it up to be like, right, as, Jed using what he does know about LDS, their beliefs, and the trusting his gut, like Bill said. It's like, this is what it's telling me. It's telling me that basically in the past, the Mormons knew that after the massacre of that wagon, that the U.S. government was going to come after them. So, for polygamy and all that stuff. So, what did they do? They buried it, and they practiced polygamy, but behind closed doors, they weren't out in the open about it. So, believing in the one and basically the one strong and mighty that would come about. That's the thing. Ron and Dan are believers in that, and the fact is, only one of them can be there by their Lord's side in the eternal kingdom. So they're initially like, okay, it's going to be. So Jeb was thinking at the time they'll either find Ron's body or Dan's. I figured it was going to be Dan's body. I figured like Ron would still be the one, But ultimately, Jeb was like, I don't want either one of them to die, because if they die with blood spilled, because that's why he was like, don't let them like die, because if they die, they'll die believing like, oh, this was God's plan, that they were right. Like, they don't deserve to die believing they're right. Luckily, Jeb got to him in time, but even Ron was like, oh, I got a vision from God. He says that you are a false prophet and you need to be, blood atonement. You're not going to get blood atonement because you don't deserve it. So he was going to strangle him and not spill his blood. But Dan starts hitting himself so that he can start bleeding, and his blood hits the ground. Luckily, I was like, oh God. The moment Jeb gets there, he pushes Ron off. I was like, please tell me, please resuscitate him, because that bastard doesn't deserve to just get off free. And Dan comes back to life. You're like, yes. I was like, I released a sigh of relief, because they shouldn't be able to die thinking themselves some heroes, that they did the right thing. They did a terrible thing, especially Dan. Like, he shouldn't be able to go to heaven like, oh, my blood's been spilled. The fact of the matter is, I'm going to be well. Like, no. Now they've been arrested, and at the end, he's just kind of going off about how, no, you don't, what have I done wrong, yada, 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 and consider himself, Ron doesn't say anything, so I don't know whether Ron's sitting with all that he's done, and it's like, right, has he reflected upon, like, oh, was it really God's voice that I claimed to have heard? Same thing. I mean, Dan's like, sounds crazy. Ron, I don't know, because Ron was still doing that thing their father was taught him to always count to 10 just to calm down. He did that before they went back and killed Brenda and Erica, but I don't know. I don't know whether Ron's reflecting upon it, being like, oh, that's why. I think the fact is he was still willing to kill Dan is like, I don't know whether he reflected like, oh my God, what have we done? I don't think so. I think it was still about, no, I am the one mighty and strong, and you are a false prophet. Or what maybe he's trying to say like, oh, I need to kill you, but also like, because you are a false prophet, what you did to, you led me astray a little. I don't know. It's just they both deserve to go down for what they've done, what they've been a part of. And obviously, once again, this is just system, like, it's trickled down to get to this point. It's not like this just started with Ron and Dan. Like, there's always, because even Jeb was like, it led to people like Brigham Young, Ananias, Ron, and Dan. Like, it all feeds into itself. It's all part of the same beast, essentially, So at the end of it all, it was resolved. Ron and Dan were arrested. I think Diana got in contact with one of her children, and it's like, right, she's got Matilda, and they just kind of let them be. Alan's going to go be with Brenda's parents, because I think now the truth is out there, and now, it's like, oh, like, just kind of let him be. If that's where he needs to be, that's where he needs to be, because he can't be around all of this. Once again, Ron and Sam are like, okay, well, we know Jacob, he's the one that ended up bringing Ron and Dan's book or whatever. Because he's the one that ended up, when they arrested Sam, he's the one that ran away a couple episodes ago when they arrested Sam and busted out door and they couldn't find him. Because I was worried that Jacob was going to be the one, but now in retrospect, he was like, right. Because now he knows, like, he heard on the radio what Jeb had said about, like, oh, that's why he decided to come in, because it's like, right. Because Brenda, he considered Brenda his angel. She was kind of like that voice of reason in their family. And because he got dragged along, but he was never about what his brothers were about either. So I don't know what that means for Alan and Jacob going forward. Probably still not going to be tight with Ron not Ron, but Robin and Sam, like, because Sam's still all about that. So I think there's still so much left unresolved. Maybe you get a little bit more answers, like, obviously this is based on a true story, so probably, like, maybe there's stuff that gets tackled real life that, the aftermath, you probably have to read, like, the history of all of this to really kind of get the full scope of just where things are present day and all of that. I don't know, but once again, just kind of makes it even more depressing knowing it is a true story. Like, at the end of the day, Bill was telling, Jeb, like, go home, like, to your family. And I love that whole thing of, like, yeah, he's like, yeah, I'm going to go back to my beers and my, like, my frozen dinners or whatever like that. But he had told this, he sings this song that because, like, he's like, right, like, he said there's some stuff, like, because he grew up Catholic and stuff like that. So, like, some of that still carried over. And so he ends up talking to Jeb about, there's also a song he sings that his people had sung because it was a song to be like, right, the buffalo will come back. And Jeb was like, did they? And it's like, no. And the white people massacred all of my people just for that, But he's like, so I don't believe in, because it was basically like the buffalo will come back and you'll find your way back home, essentially. But Bill doesn't believe in it, but he feels comfort in it, just because you might not believe those words doesn't mean you still can't find comfort in them to some extent, that you can't still find home in it. So I think Jeb took that and decided to go back home. So reunited with his family. He's not going to push that whole angle. Even though he doesn't believe those words anymore, I think he's going to pretend he's going to say them even if it doesn't believe him, because it brings him back home with his family. It keeps him and his family whole. So what that really means for him going forward, I don't know. Like, because that was his biggest reason he didn't want to, like, he kept putting off his testimony, because it's like, right, if they find out that I'm speaking these words and I don't believe them, that whole rigmarole. But also in the aftermath of everything with Ron and Dan, who knows what kind of shakeup that's going to have at the church, too. But that moment he had with his mom at the very end, I thought was beautiful, where she's like, oh, like, she's talking about the view, she's saying, like, oh, this is the Lord's miracle, and he's like, me just being here with you, that's seeing this, that's a miracle all on its own. Can that just be it? And his mom was like, yes, of course. And I just thought that was kind of a beautiful way to end off on some beauty, still with some complications. Like I said, it's not like some neat little bow. Like, what that means for Jeb going forward, what he has to kind of carry forward with those beliefs, and just still being a part of that now, knowing the ugliness of just what his church has, like, what it's represented in the ugliness that's come up, not just about the past, but even present day with the people responsible for things turning out the way it has, people not stepping in and stepping up when they should have over the course of this story, that how you carry that and continue, like, well, once again, I guess if it's for the sake of your family, because he'd even said, like, right, the stuff that his daughters were writing in the books, it wasn't copacetic with him anymore. Once again, like, his eyes were now open to all of it. Like, this, So I don't know what that means for him in the long run. But like I said, I think there's some beauty that can be found at the end of this. That he found some middle ground, I think, from all of this. And maybe that in itself, you know, being what Alan said, like, right, he's going to say these words but not really believe them like Bill said, but maybe do what Alan said and let his family be his faith. And that's so as they're praying at the end, he just has his eyes open and he's just looking at his wife and his children. So that's going to be the thing that kind of carries him forward, not the faith in all of this, you know? So, I don't know. It's a heavy, I mean, for one, it's a hefty episode, because, like, most episodes are roughly about an hour, a little less, maybe a little more. This was, like, almost an hour and a half episode, and they used every minute of it, too, so. But not just a hefty lengthwise, this was a heavy episode with just all the revelations and just everything that went down, so. Either way, this, like I said, this was just in totality, this is a very powerful story. I read a little bit. I thought this was interesting. Once again, I'm part of the problem. I don't always read all the way through, but I did get a glimpse of something that was saying, like, oh, how this show gets Mormonism right. I guess because nothing's ever really tackled something like that heavier themes and elements and like most every religion comes once again with its complications and its ugly past, and just some aspects of it you're like, ugh, you know. So I don't know, because that was like partway through the season I saw something say that, so I don't know if that might have changed over the course of the season or not, but it opened my eyes to certain aspects about Mormonism. Once again, that's also like I have to do my research afterwards, because I don't know how much of any of this has changed, because the show takes place in it feels like the 70s or 80s, but it's like, who knows how much has changed in. I mean, obviously learning a little bit more about their history, about the whole Brigham Young situation, and just kind of where things started. Once again, like, polygamy being like a fundamentalist thing, but I don't think it's as much of a fundamentalist thing now. I think it is just kind of part of just Mormonism in general. It can be, I think, but I could be mistaken. Either way, but like always, when it comes to, you know, coming to the end of a series, you know, I wish everyone involved, cast, crew, in front of the camera, behind the camera, I wish everyone the best in their future endeavors, whatever that may be. But yeah. I'm definitely going to need something to kind of, like, you know, palate cleanse, like, just kind of like I said, this is just kind of a lot, you know, so I'm probably going to need to watch something to kind of lift me up a little bit after this. Like I said, there was some silver lining, but there was just a lot of heaviness to this episode. I mean, it kind of like smack you in the face with all this, with this finale, but yeah. Either way, that's really all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.